Like the title of the video says, we are going to be covering Pablo today. Pablo is a support in Evil Dead the game. If you look at the bottom of the track, it should have timestamps there for you to jump to the appropriate sections. But as a primer to the guide, we're basically going to be started with my opinions and how I think his gameplay and play style should be. We're going to talk about some mistakes I think a lot of people make. After that, we're going to get into the abilities. And he has a lot of pretty interesting and sort of arcane abilities that may not work exactly the way you think they do. After that, we're going to get into the perk tree, and the perk tree for Pablo I think is pretty straightforward. He has a very good base setup, I think, with a very little amount of variation in my opinion. So let's go ahead and jump into gameplay and kind of like Pablo mechanics. So Pablo is a stealth-based character. A lot of people, and this is sort of the source for a lot of Pablo hatred, is the fact that Pablos tend to just kind of go off on their own. They just kind of end up on the other side of the map thinking that they're soloing all of the map objectives or something, while the team is fighting a bunch of stuff and eventually they run out of steam and they die. Now, why does this happen? And it's part of the fundamental problem, I think, with a lot of people's view on Pablo, and that is Pablo is a stealth character, but he is also a support character. That means that whenever he uses a Shimps or an amulet, it uses it in an AoE around him. Why is this important? Well, effectively, if your team is fighting and you have 3 people, let's say, get hit by a couple attacks, that means they're all going to have to pop a Shimps in order to heal, whereas Pablo could just use 1. So first and foremost, your role as Pablo is to be a healer. So you shouldn't be halfway across the map. Now, I'm not saying you can't go on mission in Pablo's and try to, grab map pieces that are nearby while the demon's possessing somebody or something. I'm not saying that Pablo shouldn't go and do cool stealthy stuff. What I'm saying is you shouldn't be more than 1 zone away from your team pretty much ever. The one exception to that is if you're trying to do the everybody let's split up and take a car strat. I'm not a big fan of it personally, but in general, Pablo should be with the team. This causes some conflicts with people because Pablos tend to just run off, but that's the way I think you should play him, and I build around that and I build for that. And I think his kit lends to some pretty creative things that you can do in a stealthy fashion, even with sticking to your team. So let's go ahead and jump through that area, and then we're going to talk about what I think about Pablo. I think Pablo's actually really, really good. I know a lot of people think Pablo is trash, he's one of the worst characters, he doesn't heal health, etc, etc, but I do actually genuinely believe he's very good, and I think if Pablo and Sash had increased healing ranges, even out to 10 meters, whereas Cheryl's is 15 currently, even if they got 10 meters, I think both of them would be superior supports to Cheryl. That's my opinion of Pablo. I think Pablo is kind of easy to play, but is often misplayed because of a misunderstanding, but I still think he's very good if you know what you're doing. Now that we're through my opinions and gameplay advice, let's talk about his mechanics, his specific abilities, and how they work. So first off, we have Gift from El Brujo Especial. I'm probably going to mispronounce things, so it is what it is, but this ability is a 2-minute cooldown where you drop an amulet at your feet. Now, this is one of the best things about this ability is that it adds an amulet to your inventory, right? You basically drop it at your feet and then you can pick it up. Now, it doesn't have a lot of healing throughput. Let's do a comparison real quick. So, Pablo creates an amulet every 2 minutes. Effectively, an amulet, if you hit everybody on your team with it, will be 450 HP. You give yourself 1 full shield bar, which is 150 shield HP, and you give everyone else 100. So if you hit everybody, that would be 3 times 100 is 300, plus the 150 to be 400. Let's go and look at a very similar kind of situation, and that'll be Cheryl. Cheryl also has a 2-minute cooldown on her Q ability. Her Q ability also restores HP. It restores 60 health every 6 seconds. This adds up to 360 HP per person in her circle. Let's also assume that she's going to hit everybody, and let's also assume that it's going to be a full amount of heal. So we're not healing 2 people that are already at max HP or something. Let's just assume the best case scenario for healing touch. So it would be 360 times 4, which would end up being 1440 health. Now, comparing 1440 to Pablo's 450 obviously seems really bad. However, Healing Touch is one of those things where you're not going to be using it very often unless you're outright in combat. So when you're at objectives, if the demon has already found you, if somebody accidentally got hurt really bad, you're going to have a lot of situations like that where you're going to be able to, use your healing. But a lot of the time, especially early game, you're not going to be using Healing Touch on cooldown. Almost never. Whereas on Pablo, you're actually going to be using it pretty much always on cooldown. What this means is effectively Pablo has much higher uptime on his Q, while it has much smaller of a heal, probably around a third of the actual healing throughput on that. He's going to have way higher uptime. I would say probably at least double the uptime of Cheryl's Q. So while Cheryl's is a bit better than Pablo's, it's probably not as bad as you're thinking just from a practical standpoint. Next up, let's jump into Camouflage. Now, Camouflage is probably the reason why a lot of people are going to even click on this guide. This thing has a lot of stuff going on. It doesn't really explain anything. There's a lot of different nuances to how certain interactions work, and there's even a bug. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Just reading what it says demons are no longer able to detect you using demon vision. Now that's super vague. What does that even mean? Effectively, there's a couple ways that demons will detect you. So first of all, you have the ability to appear on the map. Now the demon, at least last time that I tested this, the demon has a vision on the map and on the mini map of around 90 meters. That's a 90 meter radius around them, which means a giant 180 meter bubble around them is where they can detect if a person is quote unquote nearby. Pablo does not appear on that. So even if the demon is staring Pablo in the face, they will not appear on the mini map and they will not appear on the over map, the large map. So that's the first thing. The second thing is all survivors have like an aura, and I don't mean like a leader aura. They have like an outline on their actual character model that's kind of painted like in a yellow orangish color. This is for all survivors except for Pablo. Pablo does not get this outline. Now, there's another thing that can make you appear on the minimap besides being far or close. It's having your fear high. So the fear bar on the bottom left actually has like a little eye on it, and that's generally, without modifiers and perks and things like that, the area where you're going to be detected by the demon and you're going to be possessible. They're usually the same, but not always. So what does that mean? Pablo cannot be detected even if you are at maximum fear. He cannot be. And a lot of people think that he can be. They're mistaken. There is a bug that makes people think that, but it isn't exactly how it works. So, being at high fear does not reveal you, and being at high fear also will highlight you in a red aura. So your aura changes, that little outline around your character changes from like that yellow orangish color to a red color. Pablo also does not have that. So that means even if you're possessible, the demon is going to have to look at the bottom left of the screen and see that you're possessible and then find you because you have no outline. Most of the time the maps are pretty dark. If you're kind of dropping yourself against bushes or trees or something, it's going to be even harder to see you. So it's very hard to detect Pablo in general. Now, most of the things in the game that are classified as making noise also do not work on Pablo. So if someone gets in a vehicle, it will actually pop up on the mini-map in the map and say someone's making noise, and it'll show an icon on the map for the demon and say, hey, Scotty got in a car or something like that. When Pablo does that, it doesn't actually show up. It doesn't give a notification. The one thing that it will do, however, is if they open up their overmap, their large map, they can actually see a vehicle moving around on the map. Now, it won't notify them, and it won't show that it's Pablo driving, but Pablo is the only one in the game that can even do that. Now, you cannot get in the car with a Pablo. If you get in the car with a Pablo, that will automatically trigger the demon to know that you're getting in the car, and they'll know. They won't know that Pablo's there, but they'll know that you're there. So there's a lot of weird little nuances with vehicles and how Pablo works. So in general, it's not a super good idea if you're going against a good demon, because they'll just look at the map and see you going around. They'll know exactly where you are. However, against a lot of demons, against, you know, not great ones or even intermediate ones, they probably don't know some of these distinctions. Now, another thing that makes noise that notifies the killer where you are is shooting guns. Pablo can do this as well. You can shoot guns from the first second of the game and not notify the demon. This is super good. This makes looting and going through loot areas in the beginning of the game way faster. Normally, as support, it takes forever to clear things. Even if you get like a kind of a decent weapon like an axe or a sword or something, it still takes forever. So Pablo is going to be able to literally just pull up and start shooting things in the head immediately. This makes his looting phase a lot cleaner, a lot quicker, a lot smoother. It's also going to save on a lot of chip damage. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, the other major thing to know about Pablo's camouflage is actually the fact that it can bug. It can actually bug out and you can lose camouflage. And this is the main reason for confusion that people have. If you go into the bleeding out state, if you go down, you lose your camouflage. This means that you basically start acting like a normal survivor. If you get to high fear, they can see you. If you shoot your gun, they can see you on the minimap. I don't believe that you actually get an outline like the orange and the red outlines, but I know as a fact you show up on the minimap. So just keep that in mind. If you go down as Pablo, you will lose your camouflage. I think this is a bug. I'm pretty sure it's a bug because it's a major feature of the character and it's basically the entire reason to play him. So hopefully they get that fixed at some point. So moving on from how Pablo's camouflage works, let's talk about probably one of his most straightforward abilities, and that is Legacy of El Brujo. You begin the match with an additional amulet. This is basically like Cheryl's Shimp passive, except much worse. So in Cheryl's version, she gets an extra Shimps at the start, and then she has an extra maximum of 2 Shimps. Pablo doesn't get the extra maximum, which kind of hurts. It kind of sucks. I don't know why they wouldn't give it to him, but they would give it to Cheryl. But it could use a buff. This ability is pretty weak. Maybe not the worst ability in the game, but it isn't good. Jumping down to his final ability is Shamanic Protection. Your shield bar will gradually recover over time until you have at least 1 full bar. This does mean you're first for a full bar. If you have 1.5 bars, it will not recover your second bar. It won't work on your third or your fourth bar either. It is only your first one. Only the very first leftmost bar will get filled by this ability. Now, how does it work? Whenever you take a hit, it puts this ability on cooldown. It's a 20-second cooldown, so your shield will not begin regenerating until that 20 seconds is up. Now, if you are under any shield at all, like you're into your health pool, you will regenerate shield. If you are in your first bar and you only have like half left, it will regenerate shield bar. If you're on your second bar, this ability will do nothing. So just keep that in mind. As for the rate that it regenerates, it's about 10 shields per second. That means if you have a full shield bar to regenerate, that's 150 shield HP, it'll take you 15 seconds. So all told, the last time you get hit, if you don't have any shield bars left, it will take you 35 seconds to regenerate that shield. Now, this regeneration can work in combat, but if you get hit, it will reset that cooldown. So just keep in mind that the delay is based on when you get hit and not when you are in or out of combat. It works on objectives, in vehicles, all of that kind of stuff. It is only when you get hit that it goes on cooldown. So Shamanic Protection is really good, and it's actually one of the ways that we're going to be able to build Pablo a little bit differently than the other characters. So let's go ahead and jump into the perk selection and builds. So Pablo is actually really straightforward in my mind and the way I built him. Shimps Plus is a must on Pablo, an absolute must. The reason for that being he has less healing throughput than the other 2 supports. Shimps Plus is more important on him than the others. Now, I take Shimps Plus on everybody. I think it's really powerful and really good, both for yourself and for the amount of AoE healing throughout a match, but I highly recommend Shimps Plus. I put 1 point into Artful Dodger for our extra dodge. That takes us from 2 to 3 dodges. Down here, we're going to go ahead and get maximum capacity on amulets. This is really important for his Q ability so that you're not leaving amulets behind all the time. So I think this is going to be your opener if you just started leveling Pablo. Now from here, for leveling purposes, the build kind of diverges, but it basically comes back to the same point once you get him maxed out. So if you are a pre-made, I would recommend going over here into Packing Pop first. So coming over here, grabbing Deep Pocket Shimps, and then getting Packing Pop, and then coming over here and getting HP. Now, 4 out of 4 Industrial Strength is still bugged. It does not work if you put a 4th point in here. It will actually basically remove all of that percentage. Instead of getting 25% max health, you would get 0% max health. I did check this myself as of the latest patch, so please be aware of that and look out for that bug fix if you're watching from the future. But for now, we're going to take 3 out of 4 in this. Now, if you are solo, I would actually recommend something slightly different, and it's kind of a more selfish build, and that is going immediately into Reinforced Amulet. Let's talk about that for a second. This gives you 10% damage reduction while you have shield left. Now the important thing to note about this is actually a hidden mechanic and just how it works. If you have 10 shield left and somebody hits you for, let's say, 200 damage, you actually get this 10% damage reduction for the entire hit, not just that 10 HP. So this is super, super good. Even if you have a tiny sliver of shield, it's going to give you that damage reduction for the whole thing. It's very, very good for Pablo and AOD. So then we're going to come up here and we're going to immediately go into Tougher Than Hell. Tougher Than Hell is obviously really, really good too. 10% damage reduction. And between these, you're actually going to have 20% damage reduction all the time. This is super, super good, and it makes Pablo actually quite a bit tankier than the other supports. So from here, what do? Well, we're going to obviously go back into these and grab the HP. So this right here, I think, is Pablo's core. You really only have 2 points to play around with, in my opinion. Now, how you play around with these points is kind of up to you. I know a lot of people like going into damage, so if you really want to get like 10% damage on ranged weapons, you can. I did some checking, and there's not a lot. I did some calculations. There's not a lot of breakpoints that you hit. It's really based on what your base weapon is. So I really don't recommend hollow points on pretty much any support, even Sash. So I really wouldn't recommend this. The 2 paths that I would recommend you go, however, are either Seeing Stars, and this is my current build. Obviously pumping up that balance bar damage to help stagger things, to help get into finishers yourself, that kind of thing. Or going into Packing Pop and Industrial Strength. Now this version currently is not good because the skill is bugged. However, after they fix it, this will be my build. I will be going into this once they fix Industrial Strength, but as for now, I am going into Seeing Stars. Now, this is the current build. I've talked about what I do after they fix it. I've talked about everything about Pablo, and he is kind of a weird, hidden, mechanic-y kind of character. If I have missed anything or misrepresented anything, let me know. Let me know if you guys have done testing. I'm still learning too. I had to do a bunch of testing on Pablo to figure out how he works and how this weird bug works and all of that kind of stuff. And I think I've come up with a lot of information, but I'm pretty sure I still don't know everything about this game. So if you guys have any information, let me know too. I'm still trying to learn. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys.